The purpose of my presentation is to provide an overview of an information learning activity, or ILA, that was conducted with my Year 7 class. Firstly, I will provide an outline of the ILA and the overall process followed. Secondly, I will explain the methodology used to analyse the results of the ILA, and then provide an overview of the most significant outcomes from the project. With these results and outcomes in mind, I'll then explore some of the key recommendations I suggest for improving the way in which we teach information literacy and inquiry learning skills at our school. During Term 3, the Year 7 students were immersed in the study of history with a focus on ancient Egypt. I established a guiding inquiry question for the unit. What lessons could modern-day society learn from the social and political structure of ancient Egypt? I wanted the students to explore the ancient Egyptian society and use their research findings and evidence, in the form of primary and secondary sources, to present a personal interpretation of how the society was structured socially and politically. I was also keen to challenge the students to generate their own ideas about the lessons modern society could learn from the success, or otherwise, of this ancient civilization. This part of the task was designed to give students the opportunity to make meaning from their research and apply this knowledge to the world in which they live. Ideally, it was hoped that the task would engage the students in transformative information literacy practices and challenge them to critique and identify ideas that could transform modern society. The unit was developed to ensure strong alignment with the Australian history curriculum. A summary of the key curriculum content and learning objectives is available on my blog. The ILA was conducted over a 4-week period during which students were given access to laptops 2 to 3 times a week. The teacher librarian provided a large selection of non-fiction books that were available to students throughout the duration of the project. The teacher librarian, however, was not part of the teaching team. As the class teacher, I was present during all lessons. During the 4-week project period, the students were engaged in a number of class discussions about the topic and mini workshops on research skills. Students were also engaged in independent research sessions, during which time they had unrestricted access to the laptops and the books. The manner in which students were to present their research was not predetermined. Rather, they were given the opportunity to choose their preferred presentation medium, with the only requirement being that students use a combination of visual elements and text to demonstrate their learning. For the purposes of analysing the ILA, data was obtained from 3 main sources. The School Library Impact Measure, or SLIM, toolkit was the primary method of collecting data about the students' knowledge and experiences throughout the duration of the project. The 3 SLIM questionnaires were administered to students at 3 critical points during the research project: prior to the commencement of research, in the middle of the project, which was the 4th lesson, and at the end of the project, which was the 8th lesson. Student-teacher conferences were also conducted with all students during the ILA. These conferences were held during lessons 2 to 6. Discussions revolved around topic content and linkages students were making in their research, and we also discussed how the students were feeling about their research project. During lessons 7 and 8, students worked independently to create their final presentation. Observations and anecdotal notes were recorded to provide an informal insight into how the students were engaging in the class discussions, the methods they were using to conduct independent research and note-taking, and the linkages they were making in their learning. These records also provide insight into the students' perceived strengths and weaknesses, and assisted me to identify students requiring additional support. Whilst all 23 students in the class completed the research project, only 15 of these students were tracked for the purposes of data analysis. These 15 students completed all 3 questionnaires, and it was felt that tracking this group would provide the most consistent data. This participant group includes students with a broad range of abilities. Question 1 of the survey sought to ascertain what students knew about the topic. Students were encouraged to write freely for this question. In accordance with the SLIM toolkit methodology, comments provided by the students were classified into either fact statements, explanation statements, or conclusion statements. The data indicates that whilst the number of factual statements was high for questionnaire 1 and 2, the overall number of explanation and conclusion statements did increase by the end of the project, and the number of factual statements dropped markedly. It is worth pointing out that the overall quality of fact statements also improved over the duration of the project. For me, these results indicated that students did engage in some deep learning throughout the inquiry process and were able to make some connections and draw some conclusions about what they had learnt. The conclusion statements identified in the first two questionnaires were from student who I have called Student A. This student had previously studied ancient Egypt and enjoyed the topic immensely. When students were asked to rate their interest in the topic, only one student indicated they had no interest at all, and this lack of interest remained consistent for the student throughout the project. Only two students recorded a change in level of interest during the project, moving between quite a bit interested in questionnaire 1 to not much interest in questionnaire 2 and back to quite a bit interested in questionnaire 3. The graph, however, indicates that the majority of students showed at least some interest in the topic throughout the duration of the project. It is interesting to note that as the project was brought to a conclusion, students were observed to be showing less enthusiasm about the topic, but remained interested in producing a final presentation product. Informal conversations revealed that students were tired, had had enough engagement with the topic, and were ready to move on. I think as teachers we often feel the same way. This graph indicates that students perceive themselves to have a higher level of topic knowledge during the middle and end stages of the project. When correlated with the number of fact statements recorded in questionnaire 2, it is feasible that students felt they had a much higher level of topic knowledge halfway through the project, as they had recently acquired many new facts through focused research. In all three questionnaires, students were asked to identify what they found easy to do when completing research tasks. The results recorded in questionnaire 1 included a variety of tasks including internet searches, note-taking and using books. One student stated that talking to family and friends created a positive benefit for their research. 3 students said they found it easier to watch documentaries and take notes. 4 new categories arose in questionnaire 2, where students identified the following as easy: gathering and sorting information, using own questions to take notes, using headings for notes, and transforming notes into their own words. These ideas also carried through to questionnaire 3. The inclusion of these statements about the use of headings and their own questions to take notes directly correlates with a number of lessons that were conducted early in the project period. During the first lesson, the students were given the opportunity to draft their own questions in order to direct their research and ultimately their inquiry. In subsequent independent research sessions, students were asked to then review their initial questions and add additional questions that had arisen as a result of their discoveries. Students had not previously engaged in such a process. The inclusion of these 4 new ideas in questionnaire 2 and 3 can be interpreted in a number of ways. Students were keen to identify their newly acquired research skills. Students enjoyed the freedom of directing their inquiry rather than being restricted to teacher-assigned questions and learning pathways. Or students found the process of questioning and using headings to be a useful way of organising their information. One student wrote, "I really liked the idea of asking yourself what you wanted to know, then going to find the answer, then turning that into your own words." Another student reported, "The one research skill I learnt was not just to go on the internet and write down random notes. I've learned that writing questions down and researching them is easier than winging it." There were some recurring themes across the 3 questionnaires in relation to the tasks students found most difficult to do when researching. These include finding trustworthy websites and useful information and relevant images, using books for research, understanding information, note-taking, and transforming notes into their own words. The issue of finding trustworthy websites first arose in questionnaire 2. This is most likely the result of a class discussion about the issue of finding conflicting information when undertaking historical research. A number of students highlighted the fact that they were not able to ascertain the authority of the websites and found it difficult to resolve conflicting viewpoints. This provided a valuable teaching moment as the class discussed the credibility of different websites and the need to complete a thorough analysis of information found and make a judgment about its validity. One student determined that if 9 out of 10 websites provided the same answer, then this proved credibility. Another student reported that they simply found it easier to limit the number of websites they looked at. The task that students identified as difficult in questionnaire 1 became the focus of whole class research skills lessons. It was pleasing to see a decline in the number of students across the 3 questionnaires who reported difficulty with note-taking skills and transforming these notes into their own words. This is most likely attributed to targeted and timely intervention for those students who needed assistance. A worrying result, however, was the number of students who had difficulty understanding information varied from 3 students in questionnaire 1 to 1 student in questionnaire 2 and peaked at questionnaire 3 with 4 students. This could indicate that information literacy skills were not adequately addressed throughout the duration of the research project. The lower score in questionnaire 2 could be attributed to the fact that at this stage of the project, students were focused on recording fact-based information rather than analysing the information for the purposes of drawing conclusions for the final task. Targeted intervention during the middle and final phases of the project could have assisted students to more confidently make meaning from their research and apply this knowledge when attempting to draw conclusions.